Jim will be the exclusive viewer chat provider in real time throughout Saturday's Tank Davis versus Frank Martin World Championship on the HD live stream at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's only brought to you by ppv.com.
So. A new medium of communication.
Yes.
When I, finished up working at HBO and eventually went to teach a course at the University of North Carolina, my alma mater, one of the subjects I covered in the course is how the nature of storytelling can be altered by changes in technology, in business, in personnel, et cetera, and that's exactly what ppv.com is, because it's a way of incorporating chat, text, live chat into coverage of the fight. So I sit and watch the fight with Lance Pugmire, boxing scene, whom you know, with Dan Canobio from the CompuBox family.
The well-in-shape Chris Algieri sometimes making an appearance,
Chris
too.
Algieri also.
Yes, that man knows an avocado when he sees one, I'll tell you that history. Jim, my favorite thing that you've been doing for ppv.com is that email that comes from Hall of Fame publicist Fred Sternberg right here, who just had a great weekend in Canastota.
I was there.
Oh, yeah, Jim was there, too.
I went up to Canastota,
when you give your prediction, and I've talked to you about this in the past, you were the voice of boxing for a generation, but now we're actively looking at your opinions, the way you can eloquently frame the sport.
Which I didn't do when I was calling fights for HBO.
I know, and it's great to hear. So when we're looking at Tank versus Frank, Gervonta Davis here versus Frank Martin, we have been arguing that this guy, Frank Martin, is much more of a live dog, or maybe I've been arguing, than the bettors want to admit, that seemingly the boxing public want to admit. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that, Tank has the kind of star profile that people gravitate toward. Tank is a knockout artist with 27 knockouts in 29 fights. People like to see that kind of success continue. I always point out that Tyson losing to Douglas in Tokyo was seen by everybody as this cosmic shock that was the biggest upset in the history of boxing. The fact of the matter was, Mike had gone the distance with Mitch Blood Green. He'd gone the distance with Tony Tucker. He had gone to the last 10 seconds with Jose Ribalta. There was plenty of previous evidence that a taller fighter with a right hand that he brought over the top and certain other style elements might be difficult for Mike Tyson. And Buster was the best athlete of the group. So it wasn't that big a shock, and particularly it wasn't a bigger shock, that big a shock with two total novice trainers trying to stop the swelling on Mike's eye with water in a rubber glove.
With a condom, or
whatever it was, So the bottom line is that people fall in love with knockout artists. They want to see the streak continue, and they blind themselves to any possibility that something can go wrong. That's why Frank Martin is the level of underdog that he is in this fight. Now, I think Tank Davis is really good, and I think he's unusual in the sense that he's a selective, highly technical knockout artist. He doesn't come in and rain thunder on you the way a lot of guys do. He's picking his shots. He's lowering his risk. He's finding the moment when he can put you in a vulnerable position. It's a very effective way to box.
Still, Frank Martin, Leonard Ellerbe said something yesterday that I thought was quite interesting. He said, in 2017, Frank Martin was getting started, and Gervonta was already a world champion at that point. There is something to be said for having lifelong athleticism at an elite level, and I do think Frank's a good athlete, but he hasn't been a boxing athlete for that long. That difference will show up on Saturday, will it not?
I think it's highly likely that shows up. And the other thing, of course, is the big fight environment. And there's no question that during the news conference here yesterday, Tank was trying to use his background, his experience in the big fight environment to intimidate Frank. Basically say, why do you even think you belong here? This is my kind of thing. I'm the person who belongs here, and I've proven it, and I don't think you do. That was a lot of what he was lathering onto Frank yesterday, and Frank didn't exactly push back in a way that makes you think he's not at all intimidated. He kind of took it in a way that makes you wonder.
Still, nevertheless, what do you make of Frank Martin for a guy who did get started just not that long ago? How commendable is his skill?
Well, he's got a named trainer with an incentive to produce something good and eye-catching after having, seen his fighter stumble against Terrence Crawford last year. He has a legitimate background in the gym, as is evidenced by the fact that he was sparring with Tank Davis at the time when he was. and he's the right style in that he's also a competent counterpuncher who might be able to pick his shots. But at the end of the day, he's an underdog. And he ought to be an underdog. He's going against a guy who's got 27 knockouts in 29 fights and has often looked spectacular doing it.
Jim, I got to ask you about this co-main event, and what I'm most impressed right now with David Benavidez. We just had him in this chair, and it's the way he's.
I'm impressed with everything about David Benavidez. Okay, there's
yeah,
nothing
hard
about
not
him
to
that
be.
doesn't.
Especially,
hard not to
especially
be.
when we find out that he apparently, Breadman Edwards told us he had tuned up Better Bivol and Vodzik before in sparring, so you know, like, he's not afraid about moving up to 175 and chasing this. But it's about that. He could just as easily be sitting here talking only about Canelo Alvarez and playing into these media narratives and waiting on that legend to say he's ready to fight him. But instead, it's like, I don't even need him. If he doesn't want to fight me, I'm going to make my legend right here. The fact that he is now in position to potentially fight the winner of the Undisputed Championship between Better Beef and Bivol means that with or without Canelo, he's going to have his chance to stamp incredible history sooner than later. That's maturity that I didn't know he had early in his career.
Self-possession, poise, maturity, confidence. I mean, there's absolutely nothing that David Benavidez lacks on a personality level. And, by the way, he has colossal power. So, you know, I think his future can conceivably be unlimited. I've said for the past few years that the first, forgive me, Andy Ruiz, the first real legitimate Mexican-American heavyweight championship contender can be a historic entity in the history of the sport. David Benavidez can conceivably be that person, and he knows it. And he's tracking it. And, you know, we'll see how all this goes.
He certainly has an electric style. What do you expect, though, from his opponent here, who off for 3.5 years, comes back, wins 3 fights, but this is a different fight altogether. What are you anticipating for Vodzik?
A technical performance from a technical fighter, a competent performance from a guy who was a noteworthy amateur and has been a competent fighter, and, you know, a chance to upset Benavidez's apple cart if David can't bring an explosion the way he normally does. But David brings explosions constantly and repeatedly. I thought, okay, here's how naive I am, I thought with his amateur background, his pedigree, and his defensive style and skills, that Demetrius Andrade might be knockout proof. David Benavidez detonated him. Yeah. I mean, exploded him like a 4th of July firecracker. And I could not believe what I saw. But that was the first time I had been to a David Benavidez fight and got to see that kind of power up close.
And also, the fans love him.
Oh, yeah.
They respond to him. He has them eating out of his palm.
Yeah, if there are Chavez fans that haven't adopted Canelo, they are adopting him, right?
When you listen to him speak, when you watch him in public, when you watch him fight, there's no artifice here, okay? This is real. He is totally the real thing. And that's why I go back to, I developed and attempted to get onto the air 3 different drama series at HBO when I had a producing contract at HBO and was seeking to develop programming for the network, and did put the Fight Game on the air, long-running reality-based on Freddie Roach, etc. I did these things. I developed 3 significant drama series, all of them with great screenwriters, outstanding pilot scripts, and they were all about a Mexican-American heavyweight contender. So I've been tracking this story for years. Here he is, if in fact it happens.
What fight do you want to see most this year? What's the one that you are really looking forward to? Either it's being talked about, hypothetical, something like that.
Benavidez, Canelo.
That works.
Why not? You know, I mean, that's what everybody talks about.
It just seems so unlikely at this point, though, right?
It does seem highly unlikely at this point. But you asked me what I want.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, loosely related to that is the news we've seen this week from Reuters, from New York Times, sources telling us that the Saudi Arabian boxing invasion, which we've talked to you about the potential of before, now seems to have like a calculated plan, a league bringing people who can't even order dinner together potentially under one roof in a way to save the sport that maybe only Boxing Santa Claus Turkey El Sheikh can. Now, if that would happen, and there's a lot of ifs, Jim, Would this be the most substantial advancement in the business of boxing that you've ever seen in your time as a fan and journalist?
Or it's complete destruction. It's hard to say. I don't really know for sure what ultimately happens and whether it's all good if one promotional fight-making entity manages to gain functional global control. Didn't Tex Rickard try to do that? Didn't Don King try to do that?
I think the mob tried that for a while in the 50s.
Hasn't this idea been around before? But to do it in that environment seems more possible and has a hint of sinistrality. But I'm not the one to be the judge as to whether this is going to be good or bad. I just don't know whether it's going to happen.
Also, it's just I keep wanting to ask boxing fans this. Show me the monopoly long term that has worked out well for its customers or fans. Name it. It doesn't exist.
Right. UFC, great for the fans. The monopoly, bad for the fighters.
Yeah.
But if the boxing monopoly is great for the fighters, does that mean we're all in?
I don't know what it means. Also, I don't even know if it's in compliance with the Ali Act.
I root for the fighters, okay?
Right.
I've always rooted for the fighters. They are the fundamental asset of the sport, and they are where everything begins and ends as far as I'm concerned. So, if somebody is talking to me about wanting to achieve functional control of promotion all the way up and down the line, my question is, show me how it benefits the fighters. All the fighters, all the time. That's what I'm interested in.
One of the long talking about topics for boxing fans is like, who is Al Haymon? Is he a real person? Have you ever met Al Haymon? What is your history
I've met Al Haymon.
Relationship with that gentleman, and what is he like?
I have met Al Haymon. And that's my history of relationship.
All right, it was about a handshake, and that's about it. Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I've met him, and I've had maybe a conversation or two with him, but there's no relationship. I wouldn't say that. That would be presumptuous of me to say that.
That's me as well. Me as well, right there.
Are you confident about the state of the boxing business? How do you feel about boxing in 2024?
Why would anybody be confident about the state of the boxing business? Okay, I mean, I've been watching this since 1955, and there's never been any reason to think that everything is hunky-dory and we're now in exactly the place where we want to be. I come back to my love for the fighters and my hope that everything works out well for them. I go to a weekend like this past weekend in Canastota, New York, where my friend Fred Sternberg was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
Which really shows you the standards of that.
I mean, they're letting anybody in now.
And I was there with Mickey Ward reminiscing about Arturo, and I was going to dinners with Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales and watching them sit shoulder to shoulder and spend the whole weekend as friends, as buddies, et cetera, et cetera. When I see all that, the world is in good shape. Boxing is where I want it to be.
We always ask you, and I'll never stop being excited about moments like this, the greatest calls, Jim, the greatest this, greatest that. Let me narrow that down and just say the greatest action fight you ever called. That means the most, not biggest moments, not biggest fights, greatest action fight.
That's not possible for me to isolate one because I called the entire Gaddy Ward trilogy. I called the entire Barrera Morales trilogy.
Jesus.
I called Morales and Manny Pacquiao.
Which is
it could go on and on.
Marquez
and
Pacquiao
on.
1 through 4. You called
every single one. So it's impossible for me to make any of those kinds of definitive statements. I've been too lucky and I've seen too much.
Okay, then let me ask you a real question. When you saw Corrales Castillo for the first time, which our friend in the business, Al Bernstein,
on another network,
Hall of Famer Steve Albert,
on another network,
they had an incredible call of it.
Arguably the greatest fight of my lifetime.
Was there ever that competitive part of you that's like, damn, I wish I called it. I called every other fight, but I wish I called that too.
Of course I wanted to call that fight. Absolutely. In fact, we were just watching video from it up in Canastota the other night, and it's still the greatest line of corner audio ever. Joe Goosen. Well, you better get inside on him now.
You better fucking get inside on him. I believe was the actual part.
Never been a better piece of corner advice. You better fucking get inside on him now. That's
right.
Amazing.
That's interesting because it'd be hard to find fights that he hasn't called in that line that
resume.
would reach that great level. But I have to linger on the Marquez-Pacquiao rivalry. If I'm going to say what is the greatest rivalry so far in my boxing fandom, I'm actually going to pick that one. Is there any moments from that four-banger?
Well, there's only one moment. There's one moment that will stand out for everybody, and I say this, not to sound extreme, but because it's real. My wife thought Manny was dead.
Yes.
And she was not the only person in the arena
55
who thought
seconds. It was a 55-second gap in which he did not move. I was supposed to be
face
doing a
planted.
live chat for ESPN.com, and I just stopped typing.
There were many people in the arena who thought Manny was dead.
Including Mitt Romney.
I forgot he was there.
He had the best view of it. Are you prepared to call that when you're in that moment for 55 seconds of what's going to happen next? Because
I don't even remember what I said. I just know that I called it. I have no idea what I said during that period of time. I just remember that I was the blow-by-blow commentator, and it happened.
And they had to show Jinky crying in Bob Arum's arms, and it was just like, this is... Damn, that's also like the greatest fight I've ever seen. It's like seriously separate from maybe Gotti Ward or Corrales Castillo. That fourth fight with the customer fatigue saying we don't need it ahead of time turned out to be, among the greatest moments, and is the framed poster that I have behind me when I'm on camera every time.
PPV.com asked me to pick 5 unforgettable moments from the 100 fight cards here at the MGM Grand, and that was one of the 5 that I picked, of course.
There are others. I mean, I don't know how much you watch other sports, but Jim, are there other sports commentators that you hear that you like? You really like how good they are? Like their style appeals to you?
Well, I've been watching sports since I was 6 years old, okay? And my father died when I was 5. When I was 6, my mother marched me down a hallway in Hendersonville, North Carolina at a friend's cocktail party and put me in front of a little TV dinner tray with a tiny television set on the top and said, sit here, you're going to be watching Sugar Ray Robinson versus Bobo Olson for the middleweight championship of the world. This is boxing. This is what you would be watching if your father was still alive. And that was the very first sports event that I ever watched. I wound up working for how many years? I wound up working for 13 years on network television doing football, baseball, basketball, every sport imaginable on Wide World of Sports before I ever touched boxing. I wound up getting assigned to boxing in 1987 by a new division president at ABC Sports who wanted to get rid of me and thought that the best way to do that would be to embarrass me by putting me on a sport where I would never conceivably fit and couldn't possibly do a competent job. And that's
he only knew.
That's how I got sent to do Mike Tyson versus Jesse Ferguson in upstate New York in early 1987. Yeah, that was supposed to erase me, get rid of me, and of course. That's the fight in which Tyson obliterated Jesse's nose with an uppercut. There was blood all over the ring. Our expert commentator, who was an executive in the division, Alex Weiler, went into the ring and asked Mike 2 or 3 questions, and the second one was, tell me about the uppercut. And Mike said, Catamara taught me that the purpose of the uppercut is to drive the opponent's nose bone into his brain. I was trying to drive his nose bone into his brain. And I'm standing at ringside thinking, wow, look at what I've stumbled into here. All right? This is aimed at getting rid of me. This kid is not only going to be the number 1 quote machine in boxing, he's going to be the number 1 quote machine in sports. And within the next couple of weeks, they all came rolling out. Boxing is a hurt business. Everybody's got a plan until you hit them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that launched, what became 31 years of eventually calling fights at HBO, because I did leave ABC. I did walk away from that contract. And I got into a position where HBO came to me and said, we want you to call our fights.
Wow.
When young, aspiring broadcasters ask you for advice, obviously everyone's situation is going to be different, but is there any kind of universal advice that you share that you find valuable to give?
Stay loose. Something unexpected is about to happen.
So true.
The Polish fans in Madison Square Garden are about to be attacking the African-American fans on the other side. Yes.
Something unexpected is about to happen. You just don't know what it is.
Well, it's funny. I justify my job a lot, I feel like, in public in ways I don't have to, because there's times that this sport is the most ridiculous, absurd, crooked, backward thing ever. I have to love it this much, like the same way you love it, to be able to stay through it. Has there been a chance, and it could be an in-ring death, which I don't know how to deal with either, Has there ever been a time where you almost wanted to take the step out that side door? Or is this love affair and this injection?
And this answer will make sense to you. The answer is no. I never, ever wanted to walk away from boxing because I was working on HBO.
Yeah.
I was working for the greatest, most prestigious, most artistically successful television network ever. And this was a vital, fundamental part of the programming. I was high status at HBO. I dined with the chairman of the board. And why would I walk away?
Yeah.
It was one of the greatest existences imaginable.
Well, I'm glad you never did. I'm glad you're back. Jim Lampley, we can catch you at ppv.com this Saturday for this fantastic pay-per-view.
I dined with their chairman of the board, too.
Good.
That's great. Jim will be there on the live chat. What a great addition to already a fantastic fight card. Jim Lampley, always going to be a pleasure. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
The
I appreciate it.
Hall of
Appreciate
Famer as well.
I like you both.
Thank you very
Yes,
much.
yes.
Feeling
there we
is
go.
mutual.
We got the lamp stamp right there.
There
all
you
right?
go.
There it is, the stamp of approval. Thank you so much, Jim.
My
and
privilege.
Fred. And, keep that ring
Thanks,
on
Fred.
for life. Okay. But if you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and if you are a new customer using our promo code MK, and
two
you put
letters.
$5 down on anything, Celtics Game 4, whatever you want, $5 down, $150 in instant bonus bets
That's right. I mean, what do you have? Listen,
for you to use.
you're not going to get much better deals anywhere, and this is a phenomenal one. So new customers, 5 down, and you get what is it again?
$150,
bonus bets.
150 in
Yeah.
bonus bets.
I mean, it's just a great way to get in on the action. And again, we mentioned before, it's not just, hey, is Gervonta going to win up or down, or is Frank going to win up or down?
Put a little parlay together.
Parlay actions, all of it. So if you're a new customer, go get that DraftKings Sportsbook app, $5 down. Use the promo code MK, and really let DraftKings do the rest of the work.
Let's talk
from
about some latest line shifts from DraftKings regarding the main event, Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin. Tank opened at minus 575 on the DraftKings Sportsbook, but has since been bet down to minus 700. 7-1 Tank Davis. And Frank Martin opened at plus 400. He is now at plus 475. And get this, Tank to win in round 1. So it'd be a knockout, right? Tank to win in round 1 is the most bet round betting prop by handle and bets. It's the most bet one.
Wow.
So people are really putting their cash down on the idea that not only does Tank get rid of Frank Martin, that he does it in round 1. I mean, look, Frank Martin would have to go out there and mess up and leave himself wide open for that to happen. This is going to be interesting.
I don't see that necessarily. That
no.
seems like a lot.
That seems a bit extreme.
Yeah.
But to recap, we have had a fantastic lineup of guests. We're only going to continue. We had, let me just recap one more time what we just said right there, Drafts. Download that DraftKings Sportsbook app. Let's get $5 for new customers on anything. Using our promo code MK, get $150 in bonus bets. DraftKings, the crown is yours.